Let's start with Chris Schmidt. Please come on to the mic, say your name, enunciate, because this is being recorded. So if you could speak into the mic and enunciate, that would be great.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Welcome, Chris.
Welcome. My name is Chris Schmidt. I'm the Vice President of the Windsor Village Neighborhood Association. I'm here to address the neighborhood improvement part of this meeting. In my neighborhood, we've seen an increase in vehicles parking illegally, blocking fire hydrants, handicap ramps, parking on parkways, blocking sidewalks. I had an opportunity to speak with Officer Mark Bell, who just retired after 29 years of service with our city. And he told me a few years ago that the city approved some overtime, that they could work morning shifts to do parking enforcement. I'm just seeing maybe if we can do that again, see if that's an opportunity. Because it primarily happens at the night and in the morning. During the day, people leave for work and they're not parked. So the next
Are you in a parking district? Or?
No, I am in a parking district, but we do not have any parking permits in my neighborhood yet. We're working on it.
So you're just talking just about general enforcement of
correct
where there shouldn't be parking.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same vehicles, same locations repeatedly. I've placed calls for service. They get tickets. We have a lot of vehicles with for sale signs at one house constantly, different car with for sale signs. So if we could look into that, I appreciate it. The other issue is about vandalism. At your last public safety meeting, Public Works gave an update on the graffiti removal. I sent both of you a picture of 5 pieces of graffiti in my city park, asking, well, let's see if it's gone in a week. Of the 5, only 2 were removed. The 3 remaining, one of them was crossed out and 2 more pieces. So in a 1-week period, they didn't remove all the graffiti like we're told. These signs constantly being put up. I take them down, they're back up. Why isn't Public Works doing anything to call these phone numbers and enforce it and write citations? I don't know why our city is allowing this to be. My neighborhood just gets constantly vandalized. Last thing, regarding the medical marijuana, I'm all for it, but the little containers, the colorful containers that the products are sold in, they're being left all over my neighborhood, in my park and everything. Maybe if we can have them labeled and maybe do a redemption value, like a Coke can, I would appreciate if we could look into that. Thank you.
Very good. We appreciate your feedback, and staff did take notes, as well as I know on some of those items we also have received emails, and we'll follow up separately. Thank you so much, Chris. You could get back to us later, unless if there's some pressing comment you do want to make, but I know that most of those comments we've received via email as well. Up to you.
I'm still learning. So
Okay.
we are working on some of these items, but we can certainly just get back to the gentleman, and we will let the committee have updates at another time to keep your meeting moving.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Next, Lizzie Lyles, I believe the name is. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Lizzie Lyles. I'm a member of the Central City Neighborhood Association. I live at 1629 West Pine Street in Santa Ana, and I would like to begin a conversation about fireworks in Santa Ana, possibly getting rid of them. A month or so before the July 4th, we have so much noise with the fireworks going off, and in the night of July 4th, they started even before dark, 5 o'clock, and continued on to 2 o'clock in the morning with all those loud fireworks. In my neighborhood, it looked like World War III was going on. I had a person come to visit me, and he said, if I had known this was going on over here, I would not have come. I think we need to do something about it. We need to eliminate it or whatever, but we need to start a conversation about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lizzie. And I would, I know because of the Brown Act, we really can't have extensive dialogue, but I would make the brief comment that at our last city council meeting, we did discuss the item, and some of us mentioned the possibility of putting it on a future ballot to see if the public wants to ban or regulate them. But thank you for bringing this to our attention. Next, we have Claire Brayburn.
Good afternoon. I feel like is it working?
Yeah,
I can't
we
hear it
can
from
hear
this
you.
side. It's bizarre. Good afternoon. I'm Claire Brayburn with America on Track. And the reason I'm here today is to follow up on something that the city put in their housing plan 3 years ago, and I want to continue the dialogue. And it's really about helping children and families breathe easier at home. We have a lot of people who have asthma issues, children, and they just shouldn't have to be afraid to go home, because if they live in an apartment, somebody's secondhand smoke is seeping into their apartment or drifting, and it causes them to go to the emergency room because of somebody else's habit. And the city had the great vision 3 years ago to include a provision in the housing element to start pursuing the preparation of a smoke-free multi-unit housing policy for the city, and I think that's a great idea. There's a lot of benefits to that. It obviously protects the health of the children and the adults. It reduces cost for the upkeep of the units, and it reduces fire risk, which is great. There's no downside to it. We have less than 10% population who smokes anymore, and the great part is that we wouldn't be the first in California to do this. Over 50 jurisdictions in California have adopted smoke-free multi-unit housing policies for their cities. But the great news is that we can be the leaders in Orange County, because no one in Orange County has taken the lead on that, although Laguna Beach just passed a wide-spanning smoke-free ban in the entire city, as I'm sure you saw in the newspaper. But nobody has taken on the smoke-free multi-unit housing. And as the youth capital of the county, I think it's a great step that the city has already started the process with the housing element, and we have surveys of residents. Over 95% of 600 Santa Ana residents surveyed support 100% smoke-free multi-unit policies. So there's a lot of great support throughout the city. We'll continue to survey, and more importantly, we've got residents here who feel passionately about it as well. So we'd like to talk about getting a study session going on the benefits and the logistics of moving forward with talking about that.
Great, thank you. I know this issue precedes both the council members
Yes.
up here, so I don't know if there's anybody on staff that might have a quick response to that, or if not, maybe we can assign somebody to follow up with her.
I haven't heard anything about it, so let me check on it, and we'll get back to you on that as well. Is it
Okay.
something that this committee would like to see on a future agenda?
Not necessarily. Sounds like there's a little bit of history on this issue, so if somebody can just
Yeah.
research the issue.
Tina Harrow had asked us to come tonight, so I'm
Okay.
sorry to not be sharing this information, following up with him.
He's not here yet,
Yeah.
so we'll make sure that we
Okay.
assign somebody on staff to follow up with you and our colleagues up here on the history and possible future steps.
Thank
Okay?
you.
Thank you. Next, on the same topic, we have, actually a couple more on the same topic from the same organization, Soledad Valentin and Alejandra Cook. Bienvenidos. Bienvenidas.
Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Soledad Valentín y yo vengo de la comunidad de Mini y tengo ahí 27 años viviendo. Y el motivo de estar aquí es mi preocupación porque las personas fuman adentro de los apartamentos y hay muchos niños o jóvenes que están enfermos de asma. Y vine porque ustedes como líderes principales de la ciudad nos pueden ayudar para que pasen una ordenanza para que no fumen adentro de los apartamentos por el bien de los niños, de los jóvenes y de toda la comunidad en general. Es todo lo que vine a decir. Gracias.
Muchas gracias. She commented she lives in the Minnie Street area and has great concern for the children there that have to deal with the effects of smoking in the area, and she encourages the city to implement an ordinance regarding banning certain types of smoking. Thank you. Gracias.
Gracias.
Alejandra Cook.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Alejandra Cook, and I work with America on Track, and I work specifically in the community, so that's how I met Soledad, by going around and knocking on doors and seeing and taking in the surveys that Claire mentioned. We do survey a lot of people in the community, and they do want our apartments to go smoke-free. I get calls throughout as well, saying that if we can do something about it from kids that have gone into the hospital because of an asthma attack, or that they can't open their windows because during the summer people are smoking outside. So I'm here to hopefully we can further the conversation about having smoke-free apartments. Thank you.
You know, since you're there, if you don't mind, can you clarify what you mean by smoke-free? Not allowing people to smoke where?
Inside of their apartments.
Inside of their own personal apartments.
Mm-hmm.
If
Yes.
there's just one smoker there, they shouldn't be allowed to smoke?
Yes, because it travels throughout the place.
Okay,
So
okay.
it seeps through everywhere. So
Okay.
everybody doesn't get the chance to smoke.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. I think that's all for our public comment, unless if there's anybody else that has not filled out a card. Per item, we will consider others. The other comments, we're taking them up as the items come up. So for item number 2, we do have Chris Glue and Peter Katz for that item. Seeing no other public comments, we're moving to approval of the minutes. They look fine to me. I'll move to approve the minutes.
Second.
We have a motion second without objection. Approval of the minutes passes. Next, we have, I know this next item, Councilmember Tinajero also has great interest, so let's temporarily go to items 3 and 4. So let's do an update on police officer hiring. Deputy Chief Schnabel and Manager Carroll. Well, great, thank you both.
Thank you for the opportunity to provide an update tonight on the police officer hiring efforts. First, we wanted to provide you with a brief update as where we're at as far as our number of positions that we've hired over the last couple years. These two charts here just show where we were as far as our budgeted sworn positions in 2014-15 at 344 and how we ended last fiscal year, 2016-17 at 383 positions. And the second table to the bottom right shows the number of filled sworn positions and as of June 30th, 2014-15 or 2015 was 304 sworn officers from police officer on up to the chief of police. In 2015-16, June 30th, 2016, we had 312 officers. And as of June 30th, 2017, a week or so ago, we had 322 sworn officers in the police department. So that's we wanted to show the progress that we've made over the last couple of years. There's been a lot of efforts, not only from our human resources staff at the PD, but also, of course, our background staff and our partners over here at City Hall, working real hard to try to get those numbers to continue to increase.
So just on this item, so that is both general fund and non-general?
Correct. That's all
Fund.
funding sources, 383.
And only sworn. This does not include
Correct.
non-sworn. Okay, thank
Correct.
you.
And so currently we have 13 recruits in or preparing for the academy. One recruit in class 227 graduating next month. 3 recruits in class 228 graduating in November. And we have 9 recruits in class 229, which is scheduled to start on the 31st of this month and graduate in January. So that's really good news. There are currently 12 trainees in our training program. So overall, a total of 25 at various stages of the academy in our field training program.
Oh, but back to that
Sure.
last item. Is this all the only occurrence of activity for the calendar year that we're in, or have there been others hired prior to this 25 mentioned here?
We've had some of these so far this year. I can tell you we've hired 19 in 2017. That includes recruits and laterals.
Okay. And so we potentially then might be at 19 plus 25? Or is there overlap between those
There's
two
overlap.
figures? So do we have a goal for how many we might hire this calendar year?
This calendar year, we're hoping 40 to 50.
Okay, 40 to 50. And do you think we are on track?
I think we're close, yeah. And
Okay.
I think we're definitely close. I think that's a realistic range.
Okay.
We're continuing.
And I know last calendar year we hired 43. That's
Correct.
probably one of our best years ever. So it would be nice to be at that level or exceed that. And another part of the equation too is just retention. And I know our new contract that was approved hopefully will also help with that. So thank you for the clarity on that. Thank you.
Correct. That's what we're hoping for.
Councilmember Villegas.
I also want to note that we lose an average of 28 to 30 a year. So,
Right, from retirees,
Right.
which is why it's important
Right,
to
so
keep
gotta
at a
remember
good
that
clip.
number.
Right. Good point.
Correct. Just wanted to discuss also an update on our marketing campaign. Council approved an agreement with a marketing firm named Census. The campaign centers primarily around digital paid search advertising, and there's also a small print and outdoor campaign elements involved. The marketing program components include, again, paid search for those seeking information on Santa Ana PD. Some of the ad partners that are included in the campaign are AdWords, that's a Google platform. Glassdoor and Monster are job sites. LinkedIn, Google Display Network, and Facebook. The social media campaign was really active during the months of May and June, as you see there at the bottom of the slide. These are some of the 3 most popular posts on Facebook. We had a video of one of our detectives, Johanna Perez, that was popular, and you'll see some of the comments there. So admire you for protecting us. Sounds interesting. We'll look into it. The videos were very popular. The next video over, a video of our police officer, Sonia Rojo, and with a couple comments, just applied last night. Fingers crossed, we'll see what happens. Another comment, what are the current physical requirements? So we are noticing we are getting a lot of interaction on our Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. And the third most popular post there is one of our department in their Class A uniforms with a comment, is this only officers' positions or civilian positions as well? So a lot of interaction, and we're doing our best to keep up with the comments that we're receiving. Our 3 top Twitter posts. Photo here of a couple of our PAL Center employees, Officer Kenny Aguilar and Dario Gaitan. Again, a question, some interesting questions coming in. What's the tattoo policy? This person here is a Marine veteran with non-gang related tattoos on one arm. So, that's the type of interaction and questions we've been seeing, which is great. Next one over, one of our gang officers interacting with the community. And next post over, 3 of our newer officers being sworn in. And a couple comments there. Godspeed to the best PD and OC. And nice. Thank you. So it's nice to see those comments coming in.
Yeah, that last one there is from our friends at the Longshoremen's Union out of the Long Beach area, the ILWU.
And here, just a reminder, we shared this in May, but we did have a couple of outdoor billboards that went up in the city. This one here over on First and Flower. I'm sure many of you have seen that one. And we also had one over on Harbor in Westminster with one of our female officers, Detective Perez. We did we had a digital ad on one of the popular law enforcement sites, PORAC. And as far as results, again, the campaign, the social media aspects were really active in May and June. So what we saw, again, the campaign overall campaign kicked off in February 2017. And what we did is we compared the 4 months prior to the kickoff to the 4 months after the kickoff. So October through January, the campaign kicks off in February, and then we compared that to March through June. And what we saw is a 50% increase in the number of police recruit applications received, 74% increase in the number of police recruit applicants with AA degrees, 53% increase with the number of police recruit applicants with BA or BS degrees. And that's really what we're focusing on with the campaign, is not only increase the number of applications, but let's increase the number of more qualified applicants with some education, some real life experience. Veterans are real popular and do really well in our academy and in our training program. We saw an 8% increase in the number of police recruit applicants with master's degrees. And again, 34% increase in the number of police recruit applicants who are veterans, and that's real important for us because, again, they tend to do well in our academy and training program, so that's really positive. As far as lateral police officers, a 63% increase in the number of lateral police officers, 125% in the number of lateral police officers with AA degrees, 125% in the increase in the number of lateral police officer applicants with bachelor's degrees. We didn't see an increase for master's degrees for this grouping, but we did see a 75% increase in the number of lateral police officer applicants who are veterans. And again, we're real happy to see those numbers there, especially as it relates to the veterans.
Those are excellent results. How much have we spent thus far on I know there's really the consultant aspect and then the paid media aspect to it. Do you have a sense of the...
Yeah, the overall contract was $150,000, and we haven't spent all that yet. Okay. We originally planned to have the campaign wrapped up around this time, but they were able to stretch our dollar and run the campaign through December. So by the end of December of this year, we would have spent pretty close to $150,000.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Can we go back to the slide that speaks to the number of budgeted and filled positions?
First slide.
It's one of the first slides.
Yeah, this is
it's just being a little
stalling
slow.
a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. Well, as you're heading towards that, I know we've had some conversations at the council level and internally about how many positions are there and they're budgeted, but are they fillable? And there's been some debates in the past about that, but I think we are all on the general page that if they are in the budget, they're fillable, and we know that it's easier said than done to fill all these spots. And I know, at least with our acting city manager and I, we've talked mainly about the general fund positions, and because I think just general police officer positions in the budget, I think it's 309, and here these slides also speak to non-general fund positions as well. But if we're right now all positions included at 322 and in the budget are 383, that means we have 61 approximately positions that are fillable, and if we can have our acting city manager or police chief speak to the fact that all things going well, if we were able to find those number of individuals to serve, that we do have the money in the budget to fill them?
Yeah, absolutely, we can fill all of those positions. We don't fund each department 100% of all their personnel costs because we know there will be, as the council mentioned, people that come and go. So we will have months of vacancies, but none of that is intended to prevent the hiring of any sworn officer. Or this also is sworn positions. It's also management and above officer. And of course, those are equally important in having a safe city, and they should all be filled. Still very confident that we'll stay within budget, but we will watch it every quarter, and if for any reason we are fortunate enough to find 60 instead of 40 people to hire, we'll be back to talk to the council about how we make those resources available to the department.
Excellent. And these are for the fiscal year 16-17, so it's the year that passed, but I know for the fiscal year that we are now in, they're essentially identical numbers, at least on the general fund side.
It was the same number of FTEs in the budget. Yes.
Right. And so really what this means in reality, because of, retirements and others, we're, again, 61 positions short in terms of the difference, and with the fact that folks retire close to about 30 a year, including folks that might lateral out, that would mean that we would need to hire, a little over 90 to really be at the full budgeted number. So we do have our hands full, but it looks like this marketing campaign is making a positive a difference. And before I see if my colleagues have questions or comments, I do want to make the suggestion that we have through what's called the regional signage program that we have with some of the larger property owners along our freeways. There are digital billboards and related outlets that staff in the recent past cleverly said, hey, if you want these nicer advertising opportunities, you need to reserve a little space for city-oriented sponsored advertisements. And so Main Place has some of those advertisements through their regional signage program, as does Tom's Truck Center. And the advertisements that I think we have are excellent. And I know I have spoken with Tom Trucks, and they're very willing to use one of our joint Santa Ana PD advertisements on their site. So via the acting chief's office, I'll get you the contact information so we can try to make that happen. And if somebody could reach out to Main Place as well, I think that would be great. For those, just to the extent that we might make the website just a little bit larger, that might be good. I know that even though on a page things look like they're appropriate size, once it's on a bigger format, you go, gosh, we wish it was a little bit larger. So if we can look at that, and that's the beauty of digital advertisements, that it's easy to change out. So those are my questions and comments for now. I do want to thank Deputy Chief Schnabel and Manager Carroll in implementing this campaign, which looks really effective. And I'm an avid Facebook user, as my colleagues here and many of the audience, so I have begun to see some of the advertisements, and they do look excellent, including one where we have some officers on horseback on our beach in Santa Ana. People wonder, well, we didn't know that there was a beach in Santa Ana, but many of our officers, especially our mounted patrols, do get requests to go out to different areas to be helpful. So I'm sure that's probably the nature of that. But I do want to thank everybody involved. Councilmember Tinajero and Villegas. Tinajero.
Thank you, Chair. I want to also remind our city manager and our acting police chief that something that I've brought up to the table, and there was a great presentation given by Officer Kaminsky a few weeks, or actually the last time we were here, was he actually gave an analysis of all the different shifts and which shifts would provide more officers out on the street, especially during those peak hours, without encroaching into our general fund. And so what we found was, I had been advocating, and I'm willing to admit that I was wrong, but I had been advocating for a 8-hour workday, 5 days a week, because I thought that would bring more officers out on the street. What we found was in the study that the best model was the hybrid model between the 4-day 10-hour shift and the 12-hour shift as well. And so if you have a combination of both, and that really did provide more officers on the street, which is more important, is during those peak hours. And so this was something that Officer Kaminsky had brought forward. I appreciate that presentation, but I want us to also look at that. We've just finished up our contract with the Police Officers Association. It was approved in this last meeting, and one of the items that we talked about was that we would look at this type of shift change as a potential for the city of Santa Ana. That would bring in more officers during that time. Now, I want to think about this for a second. Imagine having more officers during those peak times, and at the same time being able to hire more officers as well. As far as I know, for a city our size, we are way understaffed as far as officers on the street. So I think it is in our best interest as a council, as an entity, to make sure that, number one, we are using the taxpayers' money to the best of our ability and using every cent for the maximum amount of output when it comes to the city. So I just want to make sure that that is something that we continually talk about and consider as we move forward.
Well, that's a great point, and maybe a meeting out or 2 meetings out, when the department is ready, maybe we can see if there are any new thoughts on what the scheduling is and how that impacts past numbers versus under the schedule. I think that would be excellent because that has been discussed on multiple occasions. Councilmember Villegas.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of thoughts. The campaign looks excellent. The numbers with the interaction of people applying, some good numbers. I also would say that in the law enforcement world, still having a competitive pay and benefits is what is very attractive, because this community speaks to each other. All these folks that apply, they all know someone, they all have a friend or relatives who are in law enforcement, and they all talk which city is good, which city is not good, which city has problems, which doesn't. So we have to always remember that. And so I'm glad that we have the contract that we just passed to help our agency to be competitive with the other cities and continue the good work. Thank you.
Very good. Acting Chief Valentin, would you like to make any general comments about this?
Sure, thank you. I also want to extend my appreciation to the Administration Bureau and the work that they've done, really honing on what it takes to recruit the right type of police officer for our city. And so we'll continue to build on that, and we will certainly work expeditiously to fill any and all positions that are budgeted, and we'll look also at the schedule moving forward as well. So thank you. I appreciate the support.
No, that's excellent. Thank you. And we know there are also subsets to when we talk about police officer positions. They include things like park ranger positions, and so there are some areas under the police department that I think have even more of a critical need. So as we do get new folks on, let's think strategically about how we fill certain spots where there's a void, whether it be park rangers or the fairly new vice unit or any other critical position. And in some cases, like with the park ranger spots, we may even need to consider reclassification a little bit, because I know, or job description requirements, because I know in the past that's been part of the problem with filling those park ranger spots, because we've had some years, including most of last year, that we only had really one dedicated full-time park ranger, and part of that has been the change in PERS and just our job classifications and requirements. So let's see what we might be able to do about that in the future as well. So thank you all with that. Now we're going to move to item number 2, since we do have Councilmember Tinajero here, and I know this item is of great interest to him as well. We do have 2 speakers, and I do know, before we listen to the public comment, that staff has a presentation, and I know the industry has a presentation, and there might be some public comment, but I do know, since staff probably spent some good time on this presentation, let's hear the presentation first, and then we'll let the public speak. That way the public can also keep in mind what was presented. So let's have the staff presentation.
Good afternoon. We are here to talk about how we are going to address the expansion of cannabis uses. And first off, I'd like to speak a little bit to the framework itself. And I know most of you have been here when we have had medical marijuana sales, retail sales. But it started in November 2014 when the Santa Ana voters adopted Measure BB, which was actually a council initiative amendment. And then, but it was modified recently by the California voters when they adopted Proposition 64, which would allow all use of cannabis. So we went from the medical marijuana collective cannabis sales to being allowed to do recreational or what we call adult use of cannabis. Just recently, just last month, the state passed a legislation, and there were, I have to add this, there were very different regulations for the two uses, for the medical marijuana as compared to the adult use. And but in June of just last month, the state passed what they call, it has a horrible acronym, so I'm going to use SB 94 instead, which looked at merging the two kinds of uses so that they'll both be very similar, similarly regulated, have similar license capability classifications as you go down the line. But at the end result with all of this legislation is in January 2018, any city in California, unless it bans recreational or adult use marijuana, it will be legal. The state granted the cities the right to regulate that, but regulating it or not, if you don't act, it will be legal in your community. And that's an important fact because right now Santa Ana's Measure BB addresses only cannabis retail sales. So whatever we do, if we decide we have to act one way or another to make a decision about adult or recreational use. Right now, by the way, we have 16 fully operating businesses, collectives, and we are hoping to soon have 4 more. So we're almost at our maximum number of uses. The current status, again, under our Measure BB, was we have 20, and but with Prop 64 and the new legislation, we can now have. Before, remember, we could only have medical marijuana sales. And we decided to also allow delivery. Remember, we expanded recently to allow delivery. But we can also now allow certain other categories, which include cultivation, distribution, manufacturing, testing and laboratory, and a micro business. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about testing and manufacturing because when we were going through the new those new ordinances that we adopted, the tweaking that we did of the original Measure BB, there was some concern about testing and laboratory. And some of the concerns came from the industry. And in our recent discussion with them, we sort of resolved that issue. It became apparent that when we talked about testing, we were talking about it as if it were smog testing. They could only do testing. They couldn't fix the car. They couldn't, sell you a car. They could only test it for smog. And what the industry was thinking of it was more of a research and development type use because that is how the land use category had read. And so they were thinking of it as being a headway into manufacturing. And so we are clearly going with the state's very discrete licensing categories. We're going to mimic them in ours, or that's the way we are recommending structuring it. And there was a last category that they added in there, which was called micro businesses. Some of the legislations in terms of medical marijuana right now and the newer adult use, there's been some distinction about whether or not you can do vertical integration and what kind of vertical integration you can do. And by vertical integration, I mean retail sales, cultivation, manufacturing, and I suppose distribution, but definitely not testing, but that vertical integration in one use. The state has a new classification. It's kind of like a microbrewery, I guess. That would be a good comparison to it. It's called microbusiness, and it does allow these uses to vertically integrate. So they could have multiple types of uses as long as they didn't cultivate more than 10,000 square feet of area, which is about a quarter of an acre. Our next is regulation strategies. We're going to be looking now at additional ways of measure BB requirements and how we're going to approach these new uses that we have. We're talking about registration, certificate of occupancies, and background checks, those kinds of issues. One of the most critical issues that we're looking at is revenues. And one of the things that has come up in the recent letter that some of you you received from the Santa Ana Collective Association, it had a suggestion that we just take Measure BB and add recreation to that use, and so then we could come on and do and just include it in all of our uses, tax it, and proceed with it. And we were, I hate to burst their bubble, but staff had come up with that idea and was very excited about it. We thought that perhaps the council could do that. However, our legal advice has done some initial looking into that and suggested that might not be the best approach. So at this point, there are a couple of things that you can, as council members, amend by amending the ordinance, but three things that you can't. And one of them is the use, which is medical marijuana only, because that was what the voters voted on, as well as the number of the uses that we have, which is 20. We can't exceed the 20 because that is how it was framed. And the third thing is the taxation. Because state regulations require, if you have increased the tax, you're going to have it approved by the voters. We can't you can't on your own extend the taxation authority without going back to the voters on that. So that's our initial response from the legal. They're going to be doing some additional research on that, but those are the initial constraints that we're working under revenues.
I think it is confusing, and we've really worked hard to try to understand it. Do you want to hear maybe if our legal counsel would like to explain a little bit more what BB covers and what we can't do as far as adult use, because BB was only marijuana?
I think it'd be good to just hear the rest of the presentation. We'll come back, because that's a core issue, I think, for this discussion.
It is the core issue for tonight.
Moving forward, how do we allow recreational? How do we allow things like cultivation and manufacturing? And so let's continue, but we will definitely go back to that. Thank you.
Okay. So we are looking at, one of the things, though, that we were looking at is we wanted to be proactive in terms of how we were going to position ourselves so that on the next round, we would be in a position to easily shift into, if there was an election or a change in the voters, we'd be able to easily shift into things. So in terms of drafting any immediate revisions to Measure BB, we would like to have the the state regulations, which currently separate the two, we would like to address both uses so that we would be anticipating the state's implementation of 94, which has the same regulatory system for both types of uses, and have our ordinance address both in the same way. It would allow us to, we're going to be looking at drafting our ordinance based on uses and operational standards, reflecting the state categories of licenses, and providing and make sure that it's well defined enough so that it can evolve as the state licensing procedure evolves, and avoid the need for future comprehensive amendments. The city will also allow adult commercial cannabis activities effective when the approval of the voters. So that's the way that we're planning to draft this ordinance. We wanted to give you a little framework. We really believe that medical marijuana and marijuana as an industry is something that the council has seen as an economic development program that they want to build on. And because of that, we have to balance two issues when we're looking at revenues. One of them is we have to be competitive for the industry, just like we would look at making whatever our taxations and our regulation programs be competitive so that businesses would want to come here. I mean, some of the cities are trying to make them so uncompetitive, so it would prohibit the regulation so strong that they don't want to come here. We want to look at, what makes us a good place for them to come. But the flip side of that is, in terms of fees and taxation, is making sure that it is a source of revenue for us, and it is a positive revenue so the costs associated with regulating and providing services to these uses are covered by the fees that are generated, and it is a positive revenue source. So it's two things when we're looking at how we're moving forward on our recommendations. And basically what we are looking at asking you to do is to repeal those components of Measure BB that you can repeal with your authority as revising the ordinance. And that would be looking at, we would, of course, maintain the existing 20 retail locations because that's what is required. We would keep them in the permitted zones they are. Right now, they're permitted in the M1 and the M2 zones. We would remove this requirement that the medical marijuana retail establishments be structured as collectives or cooperatives. And basically that requirement means, because if they're collectives or cooperatives, they're nonprofits. So they can become, if this is what you want to do, the proposal would be that they would then become a regular business as opposed to having to have that structure. And then, but in addition to that, we would be looking at raising our gross receipts. And the number here on the slide is 6. And what we're looking at is we have a range. This is, again, something that the voters voted on. So we have a range that we can tax these uses, and it's between 5 to 10%. Right now, we're at 5%. We've looked at other medical marijuanas. There's a different tax structures for medical marijuana and for adult use because of the nature of the state's tax system. But for medical marijuana, the sweet spot seems to be for most of the cities are 6 to 8%. So someplace around in there would probably be where we would remain competitive. We would also be allowing although the law would be written to allow all these additional uses, manufacturing, they'd be allowed in industrial zones where they're currently permitted. We would maintain the 1,000-foot buffer from sensitive uses, and there would be no limit on the number of medical marijuana new uses. And by I say the new uses, what I'm referring to is the manufacturing uses, the distribution uses. Those would not be limited, but the retail establishments would be limited. And so the kick here is because we can't tax, because we cannot tax the adult use at this point, from the structure that we're currently going on, the recommendation would be to only allow adult uses effective with the voter approval of new taxes that would then subsidize the use. So that's what the current analysis has looked at. We've begun this and are open to continuing a discussion, and this is based on some of the interpretations that we've gotten from your subcommittee and the council, and we're willing to hear more and to work with the industry on these issues. So if you have any questions.
Great. And I know we'll have some questions, and there'll be additional research, I'm sure, but we want to start this early, so glad we're having this discussion today. Before we go to my colleagues, we do have a couple of public speakers, so let's listen to the public first. Let's start with Peter Katz. Welcome, Peter.
Good evening. I'm Peter Katz, President of the Comlink Board. And you know, there's a saying, sin taxes work wonders for city budgets. And I'm a strong supporter of allowing grow operations in industrial zones. And let me throw out some, and I know you're going to get some feedback that this might be gentrification, that we're not changing industrial zones into affordable housing. But in the 4 states that have legalized marijuana, commercial rents in these zones have increased 37% in just over a year. And it's because small industrial buildings go unrented. Most of the large ones are rented, but these smaller buildings are great for grow operations. Grow operations are a tremendous success and will bring in a lot of revenue. It's estimated in 2016 that the marijuana industry, including grow operations, was a $6 billion industry. By 2026, it will be $50 billion plus. So if we get in on the ground floor, this is a way of fixing some of the holes in the budgets if we do it a smart way. So 4 states since November have legalized this. It has been so successful in Las Vegas that they've run out of marijuana. They can't grow it fast enough. They can't sell it fast enough. So there's a lot of unrented commercial facilities that we could take advantage of and solve some of these problems. And if you bring the revenue in and you maximize the taxes on it and you do it right, you can provide the law enforcement to police it. So I think that's a way to go. But it's a business that's not going to go away. And if we don't take advantage of it, some other city will take advantage of it. And we have a lot of facilities in our commercial zones that could use a step up. So my suggestion is that we do this cautiously, but that it's a win-win for people. It's just like everything else. Some of us drink, some of us smoke. It's not for everybody. You're not going to eliminate it. Some people gamble, but you know, it is what it is. It's a source of revenue, and we need revenue badly. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment and some good research there. A few numbers I hadn't heard. The big news is in the neighboring state, they ran out, and the governor had to weigh in, and I guess they got a crisis of sorts. So it's interesting. Chris Glue is next, but one more comment,
I
Peter?
just want to make an important comment, though. There's a big issue if you go to the grow industries where you need to check with your fire authority, because these need to be fire safe in grow operations, because if a fire starts in a grow operation, it could be like a grain silo in the Midwest. And they've already had some problems in Colorado with that issue. So,
right. They also need water permits, and some of these use a lot of water. So, Chris.
tonight on behalf of SACA, which is our Santa Ana Cannabis Association, which you referenced previously. And I want to start off by thanking the council for their leadership, staff for their communication, and their willingness to cooperate with us. You know, our organization overall has been very impressed with the, overall, cohesion that we've developed, and we seem to be working towards common goals here. And the council's been very, helpful in helping us achieve those. Staff has been excellent in helping us. The main thing that we need to focus on is continuing that economic symbiotic relationship that's developing. And it seems to be growing, and it seems to be everyone's intention to continue to expand that. And with the help of the council members and the staff, as you've helped us so far, we'd like to see these things implemented, and we'd like to work with the city attorney to really, get our arms around these issues in the early stages. And I can't stress this enough, but time is of the essence. We really need to find a way to be in line with January 2018 because those state licenses do become available, and we need to take advantage of those opportunities. We all know that we're still competing with a very large number of unlicensed shops that are eroding at the economic engine that provides resources for the city. And we've all dealt with that issue many times, and in my 3 minutes, we're not going to cover that. But we have put together a little bit of a proposal that we gave to the council. You could read over. We would like to still look at these items in a priority order. Recreational sales is definitely the number one. Adult use, whatever term of art you'd like to assign to it, that's our priority. That's number one. We really want the collectives. And by the way, SACA represents right now 12 of the potential 20 licensed shops. So we do have a large voice, and we do represent a pretty good contingent of people that are willing to work with the city and want to get the same bottom line goals accomplished. The cultivation is the second one. Manufacturing and R&D is the third one. Distribution and transportation are kind of, behind those items. And I think working towards those first three goals and getting to the nonprofit elimination, working with a profit status, is going to get us where we need to be more competitive with these unlicensed shops. Now, the key to that is, I think if the city attorney's office would be willing to sit down and work with us, we have a team of attorneys as well, we'd like to come up with a plan together. That way everybody's on the same page. We can get the industry concerns in front of legal counsel, make sure those are adapted into the proposed ordinance. And I know that Tamara is always available, has made herself available throughout this process. So I think that's an opportunity we would embrace. And if Tamara permits, and she has some time on her calendar, we'd love to get together even as early as next week and have something to the council so they could digest, redacted, lined out items that we could put forth so the council could vote on something that may preempt a new ordinance that would be voted on by the public. But ultimately, our organization's goal is to make sure that the community's goals are represented. The cannabis industry is here in Santa Ana. It's here in California. It's not going anywhere. But we want to be responsive to the needs of the community as a whole. We want to be responsive to the council members' suggestions, and we definitely want to be a great partner to the city and definitely with the city attorney. So we thank you for your time. We're always available for any questions, comments, or
very
concerns.
good. And your time is up, but please stand by in case we might have some questions for you as well. Let's start with my other colleagues. I do have some questions myself, but Councilmember Tinajero, you want to get us going? I know you've been working on this the longest here. So.
Yeah, just a history for any new staff members, and I know for Acting Chief Valentin. We had created Measure BB as a defense. It was a defense strategy because Measure CC, some of the individuals who are operating illegal dispensaries here in the city, they wanted to go to commercial zones in several areas. What happened was, as you remember, it had exploded here in the city of Santa Ana. We had over 120 illegal dispensaries, and they started popping up near schools. They started popping up near parks. So that was something that the community realized, we need to do something about this. So when we went out with Measure BB, that was a huge, huge leap of faith because no one had ever done this before. And we sat down with all of the different groups and said, let's negotiate this. We would prefer not to have to fight your ordinance that you're bringing forward, but let's go over this. Everything was going great. We were starting to agree, negotiate, coming to agreement until one thing tripped us up. And that was that in that time, those folks wanted to have medical marijuana available to 18 and over, and we in the city knew that that was a deal breaker. It had to be 21 and over. That's where negotiations broke down, and at that point we ran our own campaign. At the end of the day, I was pretty confident that our campaign would win. Our campaign received about 65.9% of the vote. That's almost a 2/3 majority, which shows that at that election, and it was a non-presidential election, but it was still a pretty large election. That's a huge statement by the community, and what they viewed was, we want to get them out of our neighborhoods and out of our schools, and we want to give the city the opportunity to have revenue to fight the illegal dispensaries. So that's something else that we have to also take a look at as we move forward. Is there has to be an incentive for us to go after the illegal dispensaries, because the ones that are providing the taxes are getting hurt by the illegal dispensaries. That's why it was good that we moved forward on the delivery, because there was a lot of rogue delivery organizations that were out there and really taking away from the tax that could be generated by our city. So here we are again. I would highly recommend that we do not waste any time, that we get together with our legal dispensaries and discuss what is the best practice to move forward. The nice thing is this: we're the only game in town. Other cities put things on the ballot and they failed. I was shocked at Laguna. I thought Laguna was going to pass the next one. So what does that do? If you look at something, Measure BB has not hurt the quality of life in Santa Ana. In fact, it has increased the quality of life. And the reason why it has increased the quality of life is because we have the revenue to go and shut down those illegal dispensaries. I think we're down in the teens right now as far as illegal dispensaries, and they'll try to pop up. I spoke with a city council member from Westminster, and he said, "Yeah, thanks a lot, Sal. Now they're in my city," you know. And so I said, "Well, that's a problem that you have, that you guys are going to have to address." The fact is, here in the city of Santa Ana, not only did the council address it, and it was a very scary time to address it, but the residents addressed it as well with their vote. I believe that the residents of this city, knowing that we are moving into an economic time where our malls are starting to lose money, people are shopping online. When Amazon can send you a product overnight, and I'm a little older, and I have younger coaches that work with me, and they said, "Yeah, you didn't know that you can just order something?" We were at Nationals in Birmingham, Alabama, and one of the coaches said, "You know what? I need an umbrella." She says, "It rains way too much out here." I said, "Well, we can go to the store." She says, "No, I already ordered one." It got there the next day. I said, "Where'd you get that umbrella?" She says, "Amazon." What? They said, "Yeah, it was delivered to the front desk and I got it." That's when I kind of stood back, and she looked at my face. She says, "What?" I said, "No, it's making me realize something right now, that we all have to have a different mindset, and we have to think towards the future." Mr. Katz, I appreciate what you said. It is not my job to regulate what individuals do. That is something that you have the freedom in your own personal life to do. Whether you agree with it or not agree with it, that's irrelevant. What's relevant for us here at this table is to assure that our community has a higher quality of life, and that we're able to generate revenue so that we can provide better services, which again creates a good circle, a positive cycle of a higher quality of life. So I want to encourage our staff to meet immediately, and let's start moving forward to creating some solutions that bring positive outcomes to the city and in this industry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Thank you. Councilman Rodriguez?
Talk about any of this?
Yeah.
Very
and I
good.
have a number of questions too, so don't be shy if you do have.
Yeah. I'd like to see these, as you know, again, for the record, I always say I'm not a fan of the marijuana industry, but hey, we got to work with it.
How do you really feel, Councilman?
I'll always say it. Seen too many young people smoking this stuff, and more than teenage alcoholics. I've worked with all of them, but hey, this was here before I got here, and I'll work with it. I'd like to see it stay in the zones M1, M2. How big is that? I don't even know how big that is. Is it a couple of blocks?
It's two large corners on the south side, on the west and the east. are the big
Oh, about a
spots.
55, okay, great. Diet 55?
I would say.
Nice area.
I would
Maybe
say south.
15, 20%. I think
Oh,
yes,
yeah,
okay.
probably
about 15, 20%.
Probably
I'd
about
like to
15,
see-
20%.
I'd like to see for us to keep this, when we make these changes, to keep it, I want to work with the businesses. Hey, they're there, got to be fair. So I'd like to see this, I don't want to see it spread out. We need to have some kind of control on this. I do like to see them do well, and what I mean by that is that there's order to it. There's not a lot of riffraff going on around, and I'm not even sure if what's going on. I know there was a few problems in the past, so I don't know how things are right now. I haven't really received anything. So those are some of the things that I'm concerned with regarding that, making sure that we have just maintain it in that zone. They're already there. We improve it. People know that's where you go, and that's it. If I don't, I don't know what my other colleagues here, what they have in mind about having to go elsewhere or out of the M1, M2 zone, but I think we have to keep it there. That's my thoughts for now. I'm sure I got more to say in a little bit as more conversation continues.
Great. Thank you. So I've been giving this quite a bit of thought, and I know really up to this point, I think the experiment here in Santa Ana on the whole is going well. I think Measure BB is working pretty well, and we, for the legal dispensaries, we get very few complaints. If anything, we're still just getting complaints about the illegal ones because they keep coming back, including one at 1139 West 17th Street. Mr. Nunez, if we could make a note and go back to that site again there on West 17th Street, that would be great. As we continue to grow this industry in Santa Ana, I want this to be a model city. I want this to be an example of things going well in this, social economic experiment, if you want to call it that. I don't want to be viewed as the poster child for things done wrong. So let's continue to be quick, but also be very, very thoughtful and diligent on many angles. Before specific questions on what's been discussed today, because I do have some, I do want to have an initial response to questions that I think we've all had that I know Council Member Martinez also raised at the last council meeting, and that deals with, we're at 16, we can be to 20, and some aspects of, I think, moving to the next folks on the waiting list. She mentioned some time frame of a 6-month period and was suggesting 3 months. If there's anybody here that could speak to what that bottleneck is and whether that's real or perceived, or whether that's like a policy change that we could make, or if you could speak to the nature of that.
Let me take that.
Yes.
When someone puts an application in, they have 6 months to complete it, and they may not complete it, and then we've held a space for them for 6 months, and the next person comes in and said, she thought that was too long and we should shorten that, and we will look at that. But I think what she really asked is that we look at our permitting process and see if there are other ways that we would recommend with some experience now to see that ways that we can make sure that we get all 20 of those permits out and operating, and we will do that. I'm not sure that we picked a date yet for coming back, but maybe the second meeting in August?
For what? I think maybe for some of these things there might be the opportunities, again, depending upon what kind of change it is. Maybe it's an administrative one, or if it is a policy one. I don't know how quick some of these
them will
items
probably
can
need
move.
to have to come back to council. I won't commit to a date
Yeah,
tonight since
yeah,
I see everybody's going, we did. We'll get a schedule though,
Okay,
and I think
very
that
good.
some of the changes will require
Is that
changes.
administrative, or was that in BB, the 6-month process, or what's
It's
the nature of it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
if it's administrative, does it need to come back to council?
I thought it was in an ordinance, maybe not though.
Okay, well, I'll review it.
So we'll review it. Maybe
Yeah.
it doesn't need to come back.
I know for me and maybe others, I get the sense that, that's a streamlining thing, and, we've given a lot of time in 6 months, given that now it's played out and people know how these things work. 6 months now really is longer than 6 months a year ago, because now we have the experience of what works well and doesn't. So I think there are many reasons to try to shrink that that application time. So thank you on that. I do have a question on the micro businesses. I hadn't heard as much about that. How would that be any different than just having a small business space-wise where you have, I don't know, 1,000 feet rather than 5,000 feet? What makes a micro business different than a regular business?
It's a license. And so the retail license is to sell medical marijuana. The micro, and you would have a separate business and possibly a separate establishment for cultivation. That would be in a different place, and manufacturing. This would allow in one space you to do sales, manufacturing, cultivation in one space as one business entity. Not exciting, 10,000 square feet of cultivation
okay,
area.
so that's a key restriction, that 10,000 feet, which is
that's
pretty
the key
big. I
issue.
mean, if we're saying a micro business is that, I mean, that's still, I guess it's just not mass
Right.
production, but that's still a pretty good size, if you ask me. One core question that I have is, as we move forward, putting the ballot measure or amendment aside, would it be possible to just allow the current licensees to do some of these other activities on site? For example, there are some facilities that have enough extra space that they could have at least a limited amount of space for manufacturing or cultivation or other things, with the exception of testing, because testing is not allowed by the state to be in combination with any other type of license. But would that be possible to allow?
Our understanding is they could have, we're not prohibiting the existing retail uses to get other licenses as well.
On the same site, okay.
On the same site, but they would have to have licenses for each of those
For each
uses.
type of use, okay.
Or change to a micro business.
Okay. And then on the 6% tax thing, the other thing I want to have folks at least appreciate that even though it's an increase, and I'm not saying whether I support it or not, but we compare to other communities, particularly in Los Angeles, have still in Santa Ana a fairly low sales tax. Many other communities have an additional half penny or full penny for other services, and we don't have that here. So that's another balancing figure, making the 6% not too high. Another core, well, we're going to get to the ballot and the amendment thing, and we'll go back to that in your slide. But one thing that I think staff mentioned that I'm not sure I agree with, or maybe I'm not understanding, but this idea that we do not have any limits on the number of facilities in town, I'm not sure that would be, that there was one bullet in there that spoke to the number of.
We are not going to allow any more retail establishments, but you would have to, period, so that they're done. But we weren't suggesting any limitation on the number of distribution centers or manufacturing centers at this time.
Okay. What's the nature of that? Because for me, to the extent we can contain it to what's known before we allow too much proliferation, I prefer to be conservative than liberal in that aspect. So, I mean, in theory, then, based on this recommendation, every manufacturing property in town could be a marijuana business. And, for the sake of job diversity and other things, especially, again, on this front end, I'm not sure that is a prudent way to go. So if you can give more background on why have no limits.
Well, we didn't believe that they would be, we thought it would be a self-selecting type of industry. So we didn't believe it was necessary to do that. We didn't see, retail seems to be the most likely to come up with a small establishment, move out, and do that kind of thing. But if you want us to look into it additionally, we will.
Yeah, I think that wouldn't be one area that we
Yeah.
should look at. Other options on possibly how to limit. One of the reasons why I want to be conservative about it is really for Santa Ana, but much of California and the country, manufacturing space is very valuable and offers job types for some folks with limited skills or advanced skills that I don't want to lose our manufacturing base as a whole. That also ties into another thought, maybe for this round or for the future, but I think as this industry grows, especially in these new areas, what other communities have begun to address is this idea of social equity in terms of the type of owners, the type of workers. Most of these other policies in other cities like Oakland, Los Angeles have been focused on the diversity of folks that are owners. I've thought about that quite a bit, and I probably still have a preference towards that, but I think sometimes that could be social engineered, or I worry that just people are going to try to manufacture that illusion of diversity. But I think there's other ways of having social equity if you consider local hire, if you consider the type of job classifications, if you think just about tracking demographics. There's a lot of things I think we could do to strive for that, and that also includes, hopefully a living wage with that. So that would be something too that I would ask the staff to look at other cities on how they've addressed this issue of social equity, because we have this scenario where it costs money to come into this industry because it's a new industry. There's a lot of unknowns, a lot of risks. A lot of these facilities are expensive, and so you definitely have that component. But when and if this does become very profitable for these entrepreneurs, I think it's important to have many folks, including people of color, benefit, or women benefit as part of that. So I'd like to have some further study on that, and then on the. If we could go to the slide that kind of speaks to the legality of whether we need to go to a ballot or amending the ordinance, if we can have, and I know it's kind of preliminary research and thought, but if we can have maybe our assistant city attorney speak to why we might not just be able to provide some of these allowances to our current licensees rather than having to go to a ballot or allow additional users.
Sure. Are you talking about the taxation component or the uses component?
Because even those things are different. So let's start with uses. So why couldn't we just via ordinance amend our ordinance saying that BB licensees can sell medical and adult use marijuana products?
We absolutely can.
Okay.
Prop 64 allows local control. We do not have to go back to the voters for that. The only problem is that if we amend it to allow for recreational sales, we will not be able to tax on that.
But if it's sold via that same retail outlet and they're taxing all their products,
we still can't.
Just because of the clear definition of a medical product versus recreational?
Yes, and Measure BB specifically went to the voters for medicinal marijuana. So the tax is specifically for medicinal. We would have to, in order to tax recreational, we would have to go back on a ballot measure. Many cities, approximately according to the League of California Cities, 55 cities have brought local marijuana tax ballot measures. And so we would be no different than that.
Councilmember, one of the things.
Yes, Councilman.
I apologize.
Yeah, please.
But I just wanted to give some information. Yes. When we looked at BB way back when, one of the questions in the polling that was done was, it wasn't through our city, it was through a separate organization, was the likelihood of our residents supporting recreational. And it was like 58%. So that was 4 years ago. What, 4 years ago? 3 years ago. So there's a chance that I always feel that it's safer as an entity on such a sensitive issue that we always go to the voters and let them make that vote, and then we then create the safeguards and everything else that goes along with it.
No, that's a good point. That's a good
versus-
point. But then you have also then the timing thing of the state's going to be busy
Right.
trying to issue licenses starting
Right.
early next year, and I'm sure many folks in the industry are going to be busy getting in line and wanting to be first in line. So if we don't have something that doesn't go to the ballot until June or November, and speak to whether either's an option, would then, I guess, there wouldn't be any recreational retail sales or otherwise in the city until
What
then?
we are proposing recommendation, and there are several options that we can provide to the council, is that council approve adult use contingent on a tax being approved by the voters. The general election is November 6, 2018, and so clearly recreational sales would not be permitted until the voters approve that tax, because the purpose of it obviously is to increase revenue for the general fund. The other option, of course,
Did you say
is
June or November? Sorry, I missed that.
November 6, 2018 is the next general election. Of course, council has the
I
option.
know by some standards, June elections are also considered general elections because they're broad enough and they may have state and other
Sure.
elements of it. So that may be an option. That might be
It
something
may,
we could
but
study.
my research has not revealed that June is a general election.
Okay,
My
let's
has
research that.
revealed-
I think I've seen different standards
Right.
on.
Now, of course,
on
the
that.
option is, of course, council has the option of a special election, but that would require 2/3 vote. And special elections, as council members know, very expensive.
Right.
I heard figures 300,000 and upward.
Mhm.
So there are various options, but what we do know we have to do is we have to act on what we're going to do
Right.
before January.
So if we
1.
act on what you're saying, would that enable folks to get in line to get a state license, or would they not be able to go through a state licensing process until after June or November?
They probably would not be able to obtain a state license, because in order to obtain a state license, the Bureau will request the city provide an ordinance that allows this use. And although our ordinance is going to say it allows it, there's going to be a contingency there, that it allows it only after it's been approved by the voters.
Okay. There's a lot to think about there. Acting City Manager Kurtz, did you have some additional? No, very good dialogue. Councilmember Villegas?
A quick question for the staff, if someone can speak a little bit about testing.
Pardon me, you wanted more information about testing?
More information about testing. Who controls it? Would we control it? They're looking for, what are they looking for?
Oh, the testing.
I have an idea, but
Okay, the testing would be to demonstrate the intensity or quality of the product. And it would be licensed through the state. We're not recommending that we do individual licensing of testing facilities. That's not something that staff is recommending at this point. They would not be able to, the individual businesses themselves are probably going to be testing their product anyway. But this will be an industry licensed testing facility that will be approved by the state. So if you had product and you thought that it wasn't what you were supposed to be purchased, you could take it there. But I think predominantly the business owners would be using it to demonstrate measure the quality of the product, or the manufacturer, so they could provide it.
I know a few years back, Orange County Sheriff's Department lab for 2 years did tests on all the marijuana they confiscated, and it was like 86.4% of it was laced with other things, because it's a business. They compete. Whoever's bringing it in, whether it's cheap stuff or good stuff or what have you. But it's all about the dollar. So we don't want to have these businesses selling things that are going to harm anyone more than whatever it is that they have. It's just my concerns that I have for the public. But and I worry about the children with the edibles and how these things packaged, because all those things come to mind. I'm sure the people that own those businesses have families, and I spoke to a couple of them who have children, brought it to their attention. They understand, so as long as they understand. But thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I think there'll be a lot of follow-up on some of these legal and policy questions. This is a good status. Aside from what's going to be revealed via this additional research, and my interest in getting things right rather than doing things quickly, but do you have a sense of when some of these ordinance suggestions may go to the council? Are we talking about September, October, late August? What's your thought?
No later than October, but I guess we did, our initial response was that we were thinking about late August, but we will be working with the industry and shooting for fall, late August or fall.
Very good, very good. So we'll have some, definitely additional conversation, but this is a very, very good start on a complex thing, and I think Councilmember Tinajero is right. Even though some of us may think we know a good direction to go for some of these things, we may want to go to the voters and seek their opinion. And if we're going to be required to ask for a tax on some of these items, we'll need to anyway. So that's another reason to think about that. But I do not want to give up, though, on this idea that there may be other ways other than a ballot measure to do the tax piece. Next, we have an update and discussion on the homeless crisis. Yes, Councilmember Tinajero. Yes.
Chair. No, I apologize. I do have to leave at this time. Unfortunately, there's another meeting that I have to attend as well. But thank you for holding that off so I could be a part of that discussion.
No, I'm glad to do it. And I also want to report back. There were some folks here earlier from On Track who spoke of their interest in possibly no smoking policy, and they came based on your suggestion. So we've connected the comments with staff, and we'll follow up accordingly. Thank you, Councilman Tinajero. I think it's Commander Ibarra. I think this is your item.
Good evening, Council. Just wanted to bring you up to speed on what's going on with our homeless issue here in Santa Ana and some of the things that we've done with the police department. First, one of the things we did after our last meeting is actually we updated our webpage, and you could see on the right there, we titled it Homeless Engagement. Talks a little bit about our HEART program, but more importantly as well, to the right of that, there's some important links when it comes to homelessness and OC 211 and things of that nature. So hopefully people with phones can have access to that and get to the right resources. Secondly, there is a regional discussion about the riverbeds. As you've seen in the register, there's discussion about jurisdiction as well. That's still somewhat vague. I will tell you that in Santa Ana, we actually will go out and do cleanups. We did one about a month ago from 17th to 5th to 1st Street. I know there's some issues as to all the way down to the border towards Fountain Valley. Unfortunately, it takes a lot of resources, and because of the fact that it is the county and there is a ordinance section under the county, we cite under the county, but more importantly, we also need their resources, and we have to collaborate with their public works. And sometimes getting their trucks and things of that nature becomes problematic. So it does take a significant amount of manpower to coordinate those. As to some of the impact it has, on average, there's about 700 calls that are just noted for transient homeless related, but I would venture to say that there's probably more calls that are related to that as well. Some of the crimes, for instance, aren't noted because it just comes out as a theft, for instance. We don't classify it as a theft by a homeless. And speaking with our dispatch, our watch commanders on an estimate as far as the number of calls for service, we think that it's somewhere between 8 to 10% of our calls for service that are impacted by homeless. And then lastly, we continue to work with mental health. Unfortunately, we still have not been able to get the third day to assist, but we're still working with that.
What is third day?
Currently, as discussed previously, we only have our mental health on ride-alongs 2 days a week, and we would like to have them 3 days a week. There's a significant need for that, and as I talk about it all the time, she's the only mental health person that is called by name on the radio, and we're very formal on our radio when it comes to numbers and things of that nature, but they're out there, just verbally asking for her by name because, there's a lot of people that need assistance when it comes to mental health. Continuing with our HEART program, last year's 16-17 budget, we had $80,000 allocated. 40 of that was from ESG, and then 40 was from the general fund. And thank you for the 17-18 budget. Our ESG, we got $45,000, and the general fund, we got $48,000. So I do appreciate the support of the council for increasing that. One of the things we're also doing now is really focusing more on enforcement and outreach based on hotspots. In addition to just the riverbed and under the freeway overpasses and things of that nature. So as we're getting complaints from citizens, council, we are mapping those with our crime analysts, and that's helping us kind of direct some of our resources, our limited resources when it comes to that. Again, the most important part is our collaborations with mental health and our AB 109 homeless team through Orange County Probation. And working with our city partners, that's a very important aspect of that, especially Public Works and Parks and Rec, because they provide the resources and that's necessary, especially when it comes to the cleanups. In fact, we did one today at Plaza de Flags. Hopefully some of you noticed that. We ended up taking several truckloads of trash. So when it comes to next steps and where do we go from here, and we've already had conversations with the chief as to looking at developing really a full-time liaison unit, and perhaps, and I know resources are difficult, but commitment as far as a citywide task force. And when I say citywide and city resources, I'm talking about Public Works because they are an important part to our support system when it comes to going out and engaging the homeless and really the illegal camping that's taking place. With that, open up for any questions.
Very good. I know I have some, and I'm sure my colleague does as well. Let's start on this page. To a certain extent, I would consider the HEART program to be a homeless liaison unit. But if this would be something different, if you could differentiate why this would be considered a homeless liaison unit and not the other.
Well, currently we operate under the HEART program through GF funds and on overtime, and because of the limited resources that we have, in addition.
So it's overtime funded only, but it is probably the same permanent assigned X number of officers, right?
That is my goal, yes, to have the same amount of officers, and because they're well trained, they understand the issues. I don't want just anyone to work it just because. Our idea is to provide the services to those that are needed. Having a full-time dedicated officer would be one person or up to three.
Or multiple,
multiple officers that really know, and then we're talking about citywide. Initially, the HEART was started just for the Civic Center.
Right.
Well, because of the proliferation of homelessness in the last couple of years, I've expanded that citywide. The funding has been really still limited. I'm appreciative of the money.
I thought some of that funding, though, was through the Civic Center JPA with the county, and they had, we funded ourselves, $100,000 or $400,000 for extra officers to deal with the homeless situation. Is that not fully accurate? Or
yeah, my understanding is that the JPA is to provide security services through police officers, but it's not specific to the homeless.
Okay, or at least not for the heart unit. Okay, so this then idea of having a full-time unit makes sense, and that's kind of comparable to our challenges in the park ranger program. And if it would be full-time, it will also be 7 days a week is the goal, or what's your, I guess if you have 1 to 3 officers, they're not going to work, 24-hour shifts every day, so it would just be on their days.
I think initially the important part is really getting officers out there to provide services, especially in areas where they're hidden, if you will, under the overpasses and in the bushes and things of that nature. And as we get complaints, the officers will look at the complaints and focus their efforts, their really outreach efforts to those areas. So I don't think it would be needed 7 days a week, quite frankly. It would just be needed, 4 or 5 days during the week.
Just effective and targeted. Now, the sweep that was recently done in Santa Ana along the riverbed from 17th Street, I think you said, to 5th, it was very effective. We got some compliments. It took a while doing all the coordination with the county, but you did very well there. But then the question becomes, where do they really move to? And aren't we really just at this point moving folks up and down the riverbed? So as we did that, where do you think these individuals went to?
That is really the bonus question, and you displace them, but they have. And again, at the end of the day, they have to go somewhere, and so our goal is to get them into the shelter, the courtyard specifically, because that's what it's designed for. But as you know, and you've heard. And what we've experienced, as many of them just don't want, the rules that are associated with the courtyard, so it becomes problematic.
What about mental health? So if somebody is found to have severe mental health issues, can they be taken somewhere? Is there a mental health bed for them somewhere?
Well, and that's the other problem as well. It's not illegal and it's not a crime to have mental health issues. It only becomes problematic is when they're a danger to themselves or a danger to others. And then we have more authority. But outside that, our job is to really work with them. And that's where the clinician becomes very important, especially with the clinician that we have. We'll go to a call and then we'll follow up as well. And that's kind of what the goal is as well with the homeless unit, is to follow up with some of those homeless mental health, individuals. But technically speaking, it's not illegal, and so.
Right, I understand, but is there a bed for them somewhere, or are there?
Well, that is
mental health facilities, or they're only like inpatient, outpatient kind of thing, or is there places for them to stay longer term, multiple nights?
Well, if we take them because they're a danger to themselves, we'll take them to a specific location, and then they're evaluated. And at that point in time, the doctor will determine if they keep them or they're released. Or we will try to marry them up with some location that is taking homeless people or homeless mental health.
Mm-hmm. I mean, my gut instinct probably is that, I don't know, at least 10% need longer-term mental health housing, and I would doubt that there's enough beds for them, but I'm not sure. That might be an area for further study. One of the things that I think I recently was thinking, and even in discussing this item with our acting city manager, was this thought that although last summer the city did declare homelessness a public health crisis, and there was a plan put together, I think probably the city felt rushed to develop that plan, and I think many ideas in there are good, but I don't know really that that's the best plan for us or the final plan for us, or we've learned some things between now and then. And I know from Dicer here, we've kind of reviewed that plan and added this or thought about that, but it may be good really just to kind of get a fresh start on that. Because I know sometimes there's been situations where even my colleague here has been approached by, from the county, and they'll ask, okay, well, yeah, we do have dollars. what would you do with the dollars? And I don't think we always necessarily feel that we have the best answer, So would it be for this homeless unit? Would it be for housing, patrolling along the riverbed, more vehicles just to deal with the trash and debris that's accumulating? We do need to figure out how to revisit that plan so it's a little bit more thoughtful. And then the other recent thought that I've had is why we continue to need to have even more urgency to dealing with this, and maybe even being more aggressive with the county, is it's a humongous liability issue. I mean, we fortunately to this date have not had too many lawsuits or issues with folks dying or being injured out there or public health issues, but the day's going to come where, something's bad going to happen and we're going to be on the hook or at least have some liability, and that's going to be a big bill of sorts. And rather we be proactive and spend that money well to fix the situation proactively rather than at the back end as a liability issue. So I think that is another reason why, other than just doing good public policy, just as a risk management item, we need to really beef up our interest in this area. So those are my questions and comments for now, and I know Councilmember Villegas has some as well.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things. Well, first, it is true. I was meeting with the county off and on, and they did ask, well, if we have all these millions of dollars, we give them to you, what's your plan? Great question. And you and I, Councilmember Solorio, we've discussed that quite a bit, and I think we came to the conclusion that we need to reevaluate all this and see what is the plan, what we're going to do. So, so that at least we know we're starting over again. Commander Ibarra, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so last time we spoke, we talked about the HCA personnel coming out, and we had how many workers from HCA out there, mental health?
Oh, sometimes we'll get 10 mental health workers. And sometimes we'll get less.
Yeah. And then they were only there for a few days. And then I asked, well, let's see if we can get them out, 7 days. And then there was someone who was willing to work weekends. I don't know what happened after that.
Right, and that's through our PER team, the mental health. And right now, they have staffing issues as well. Mm-hmm. And so right now, they've only committed to 2. They know that we're knocking on the door, that we would like that third day to have at least 3 days out of the week.
Yeah, I think from working out there firsthand, I know if you can get them 7 days a week, it'd be great, because that's the main issue. Most of this population has mental health issues. And I know that if you 5150 them, you lock them up for time so they can get treated and get right, then they get released, then there's no follow-up. And so they go right back to this, where they were again, back at square one. Go with problems, come back, end up homeless, you end up, you don't take your meds, you don't follow up. So I've been talking to a few folks, I'm not going to say from where, but they're seeing if maybe they can work on changing the legislation. So there is some follow-up, mandatory follow-up, because that's where the key is. These people are ill, and I understand that. And if there's no follow-up, they're not going to take their meds. If they're not checking in, then they're going to, the problem's going to continue, and that's been evident. So, and I see the courtyard. I have some documents here from the county. The courtyard continues to operate almost 400 occupancy personnel over at the service center, and 700 calls since March. That's a lot, and that's then again regarding this population from around the city. Correct? The transient problems.
A couple things. It's not 700 calls overall. It's 700 calls per month on average. And on the courtyard, they overnight stay is a little bit under 400, but they service on average about 700 homeless individuals daily.
So when they stay there, it's about 400, and then the other 300 go right back to their areas or leave, or because I know it's all about the food. It's all about what's going on. Of course, drugs, because drugs are in the area. They're not there, because it's, the best place in the world. But there are services there, and we need to reevaluate everything. We need to look at things, because it's still. I know we're working on it, but I haven't seen much improvement. There's been some, but we need more. see here, the heart program, the heart officers, great job. They've always done a great job. I know them personally, and they do great work. Wish we had more people, and obviously we're working on that. And I guess, how many deaths have we had in the Civic Center recently?
Deaths? Oh. I think there was just one, and it wasn't quite in the Civic Center. It was right by the stadium, I believe. It was. Oh, I take that back. And there was also a couple in the courtyard as well. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them were natural cause because of, ongoing illnesses and things of that nature.
I know in 2016 in April I had one. But, okay, so, yeah, if we can look into another question regarding the property pickup, the truck that goes on and picks up everything. I know I was told by the staff that there was no room at the city yard. Then I'm told there is room at the city yard. So is there room at the city yard?
And I'll be frank with you, it's not so much an issue of room at the city yard. It's more an issue of getting the resources, because it's, we can get one truck and it'll fill up, and I don't exaggerate, within 20, 30 minutes. And then you only have a small, you only make a small impact, so it's more of gaining the vehicles and staff, and I think we utilize a part-time Parks and Rec staff. So that is where the major problem is right now.
So there's room then? So the problem
right
is
now
we need
there's
staff.
room. The way things are rotating, staying within the law of holding the property 90 days, there's still room. I'm sure we could address it once we've run out of room.
Well, they come out once a week at different areas, and all the stuff comes right back, and the public comes by and they drop off all these things. I remember speaking to someone, and I said, "Why do you have so many clothes and so many things?" Well, the public comes by and they give me these things. What am I going to tell them? No. And it's true. I don't blame them. I mean, but then again, we're stuck, with this mess out there, and it rains and it's dirty, and then they don't use it and they just leave it. So and then we end up picking it up, and there's this poor guy out there with the green uniform out there working. That guy, I see him work 7 days a week,
and
for I would say years. So so if we could look into that, staff. Because we need to address that. I mean, they say it's a public health crisis, but we're not doing more to clean. So we need to find staff and a couple of trucks and be out there consistent. Okay, well, that's all my comments for right now, Mr. Chair.
Well, as a follow-up on that last item, just for clarity for me, who does the trash and debris pickup? And there have been from homeless encampments, but it may just be regular trash out there. Who does that?
In general, if it's the Civic Center, it is Parks and Recs that we work with. Mm-hmm. Outside of the Civic Center, we then work with City Public Works. And if we do the riverbed, then we have to work with Orange County Public Works. Mm-hmm. And occasionally we will have to work with Caltrans when we address the issue up by Santiago Creek. So those are the main players when it comes to the resources.
Because one thing that I think sometimes some cities try to do it, and it's more of an idea than I think really doing it, but with this homeless thing, it really could be an issue for us here in this city, is we almost need some crews that all they do is 7 days a week is drive citywide and pick up trash or deal with the signs that was mentioned, and we'll get various examples of it. Because if not, you get to this thing, well, it's not my job, it's somebody else's. And so then people have to wait for the dedicated call or complaint, rather than just having certain people, and maybe it's via a contract or some of our public works staff, just, low-end classification so that it's not too expensive, and, you try to keep the city clean.
And if I may, and that's why I made the notation of citywide task force, mm-hmm. because I think it is important that we have law enforcement as well, so that way we can provide them with the outreach that's necessary.
Right, but there's many areas where it's just now all that's left is the debris, or the signs or other things. There's not always necessarily people there. But even there, I'm sensitive to that may be somebody's property, and maybe we have some formal and informal policies on how to assess whether it's trash or somebody's recent belongings. So that's probably something sensitive. So we can be here for days talking about our homelessness crisis, but maybe to close this out, Assistant City Manager Kurtz, you've now been here a couple months now?
Still weeks.
Weeks? What's your sense of where we're at with this homeless situation and where we go from here?
Well, I think that as you put it on the agenda as a crisis, that's most certainly the word that most describes the situation. Santa Ana should not feel alone. Everyone is struggling with this. I'd not heard about the citywide task force before, and I'll certainly talk to the chief and others in the police department and see if that would be of assistance if we do have any coordination problems that would be improved with. I don't like to just add meetings to have meetings, but if there's a coordination or communication problem, let us find a solution for that. You'd asked that this be a standing meeting on your agenda, and when you sent that request, we struggled with how to take an issue this big and make it into something that would be a discussion rather than just throwing things at a wall. And what we decided to start with the police department, because they live and breathe this every day, but in subsequent meetings to bring other departments in so you can talk to Public Works about what they're doing and hear that. Talk about housing and what they're doing, the different pieces that fit together. I have had some meetings with people in the county and will continue to do that and to try to coordinate around the Civic Center, which is, of course, what's probably most visible to most Santa Anans, is what's happening in the Civic Center and the number of homeless people that have made this their home and the impacts both on them and on the people that are trying to use the courthouse or City Hall. So we'll just keep talking about it. I also did get your request to look at the plan, and we'd be glad to talk to both of you in our meetings about whether that plan is serving us well, or now with some experience we ought to revisit that. Maybe that would be something alone that a citywide task force might be valuable to have a few meetings on. So there is no silver bullet or wand or anything, but we'll keep working at this and we'll keep bringing you reports.
Great. Thank you so much. That takes us to council member comments and future items. We could blend them as well. Councilmember Villegas?
Just want to say thank you to the staff and everyone present for coming out today and for all your hard work. Appreciate it. Doesn't go unnoticed. So I want to make sure that everyone here understands that. Thank you.
Thank you. Great meeting, great information. Love seeing the improved hiring stats with that marketing campaign. Fantastic. For the future, I think some good follow-up items would be discussion regarding a possible Granny Flats ordinance. I know some weeks ago we had an internal discussion about how we might be able to use some findings, short of doing individual studies, to justify a new Granny Flats ordinance, so we can bring that back. And then I know internally there's been a lot of discussions about our citywide parking needs and possible management plans for that. So this may be a good place for that, or directed to the city council, but at some point over the next couple of months, it'd be good to, in one or both venues, discuss that. And then maybe not for this next meeting, but we do need to continue the discussion on fireworks. I know at our last council meeting there was quite a bit of discussion about that, and we just got through maybe we haven't gotten through the season yet from a sound standpoint in the community, but at least the 4th of July has passed, and we want to revisit that in terms of, do we consider putting it on the ballot? And the mayor made a good point. We got to look at both scenarios of what you do and costs and expectations in the community, but definitely 1 or 2 meetings out, let's consider putting that on this agenda, and maybe there's a need for our fire department team and police team and others to begin thinking about, for the next fireworks season, what might we do differently, or how we regulate it, or maybe even staff may recommend a ban, or other thoughts. It would be good for staff to begin thinking about that. With that, if there's any other voices here, we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you all.